had. Now, I don't want to talk much about it because I did an excellent podcast on this holiday 2 years ago when it first became a holiday. And I did it on a special YouTube video. And it wasn't a sponsored video because I didn't want to potentially piss off any of my advertisers, who, because, it's a touchy subject, right? When you talk about that thing. So I'm looking now. I had saved it. I'm trying to find the podcast number. So I'm searching on YouTube to give you guys. Yeah, it's called Juneteenth is Only the Beginning. It's episode 705 of my podcast. So give it a listen. I mean, it's got 77,000 views on YouTube 2 years ago. And that was a decent number of views back then. I wasn't doing the video at the time. I'm getting more people watching now that I'm doing the video. But if you missed that podcast, give it a listen sometime over the next couple of days, because I made some good points about the holiday. But I wanted to mention one thing because I was reading, some articles about this. There was like a Twitter war going on about the United States and slavery. And a lot of people are under the false impression, due to revisionist history, that America was like, last to the, abolishing slavery party, that we were dragging our feet and every other country abolished slavery and we were like one of the last to do it. And that's just not true. I mean, Americans were leading the charge to abolish slavery. I mean, even going back to before the birth of the nation, while we were still colonies, there was a lot of movement. In fact, the state of Vermont, and before it was a state, it was just a territory, abolished slavery in 1777. So that was before we had the United States. It was a territory. And they abolished slavery. And of course, a lot of the delegates to the convention that voted for independence, a lot of those guys would have liked to have abolished slavery. They just didn't have enough support because they needed the support of the southern states, and slavery was important to the southern states. And so in order to have a unified Declaration of Independence from the crown, they had to put those anti-slavery concerns on the back burner. But that doesn't mean they didn't have them, because they did. But also, I mentioned that Vermont abolished slavery in 1777, but Pennsylvania did it in 1780. New Hampshire and Massachusetts in 1783. Connecticut, my state that I'm in now, and Rhode Island in 1784. New Jersey in 1804, and New York in 1817. Britain didn't abolish slavery until 1833. And all these people on Twitter are saying, oh, Great Britain was 1833, and we waited until 1863 or 1865. That's the entire United States. That's not individual states, because back in those days, the states had a lot more sovereignty than they do today. We really were United Nation states, united under a common federal government, but the state government was far more important. In fact, most people back then identified with their state more than the United States. If you were traveling in Europe, or you were in Europe and you met an American traveling, and you struck off a conversation and you said, hey, where are you from? That American would say, I'm from Rhode Island. I'm from Virginia, right? Georgia, whatever. I mean, they would say what state they were from. They wouldn't say I'm from America, the United States. But today, of course, nobody really mentions what state they live in. I'm American. I'm from America, because the nature of the country is very different. And so it was very significant that you had individual states abolishing slavery. I mean, when America was first formed, it was a little bit more like the European Union. Yes, if you're French, if you're Italian, if you're German, you're in the EU, but you still identify more with your country than the European Union. And that was what it was like prior to the Civil War. And so to ignore the fact that these states were leading the charge in abolishing slavery. You know, France didn't abolish it until 1848. You know, what took them so long, right? Instead of beating up on America, you know, yes, we can be ashamed of the fact that we had slavery at all, but we were among the leaders in getting rid of it. Yes, we didn't get rid of it in all the states, right, until after the Civil War. But still, I mean, think about all the Americans who gave their lives to help bring about an end to slavery. You know, I mentioned in another podcast, more Americans died in that war than in all the other wars that we fought combined. So we paid a huge price to get rid of slavery. It wasn't like it went away easy, but we were leading the path. And by the way, you know, a lot of people want to, you know, beat up on Thomas Jefferson because he owned slaves. I mean, he was one of the guys that wanted to get rid of slavery, but he actually abolished the slave trade. I think it was a few weeks before Great Britain did. I think it was in 1807 when England, you know, abolished or made illegal the North Atlantic slave trade. But before Great Britain did that, President Jefferson made it illegal to import slaves into any port in the United States. Now, of course, it went on illegally, right? I mean, you know, but it was against the law, right? Now, you know, it's hard for the government to prevent stuff from happening, right? I mean, all kinds of stuff is illegal and it still happens, but it is still significant that this happened. So instead of people wanting to criticize guys like Thomas Jefferson, they can at least look back at the major contributions that they made in helping to bring about the end of slavery and not try to unnecessarily beat up on the United States. I mean, look, I beat up on America for a lot of things these days because unfortunately we're doing a lot of stuff wrong. But I want to defend the country when defense is warranted. And these are unwarranted attacks on the history of the United States and trying to, you know, paint us all with this slavery brush as if, you know, that's what defines America is slavery. It wasn't. And what built America was not slavery or slaves. What built America was freedom. It was the individual liberty, limited government. Slavery was actually a hindrance. I think America would have thrived even more had we ended slavery sooner rather than later. Certainly had we not have to waste all those resources, not to mention the human lives, on a war. I mean, that was a significant negative impact on our economy, having to fight that war. And so had we been able to abolish slavery in 1776, when we declared our independence, I think the country would be far more prosperous today than it is. And again, not that I'm, you know, trying to, you know, blame the slaves. Of course, it's not their fault that they were slaves at all. I'm just saying that it would have been better if they were working for wages, if they had the incentives that come